All right, quadratic formula. Again, we've been solving quadratics with quite a few different things. This will be our last method, so I'm going to review some of those methods with you. There's the guy right there. He's not so bad. And it is a formula that you've seen before in Algebra 1. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. A very popular formula. One of the top three. Right up there with y equals mx plus b, which we all have been ingrained in. And the other one I would think that all of us are aware of was a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay? So a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and y equals mx plus b, those are in every American math student. We've got those in our brains, and this guy's pretty popular also. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. It can be derived from the quadratic. And where are we getting some of those a, b's, and stuff? And that is from our standard form. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So solving for x is you can solve for x. And that's why we have the quadratic formula. It's derived by solving for that. So where do you get your a, your b, and your c is elite coefficients once you have it in standard form. Pretty standard stuff. Most of us have used this. This is the part we're going to calculate first. Let's look at some of our other methods. We have had many ways. We've done the graphing. We made a table. Everybody's favorite, we factored. We took the square root of both sides, and we just spent a lot of time on completing the square, didn't we? If you don't like your grade from that quiz, please try to look at retaking it, okay? Before too long. The longer you wait on any of this stuff, the less you remember. Let's be truthful about it. I had to think about this morning a couple of my passwords after 4 or 5 days away. You know, I'm sure I don't have them, so they log in automatically because there's some safety issues there for us as teachers. So I had to think for a second, and I put in the wrong one this morning. That just tells you, the longer you wait, the more you forget. Then I had to rethink, and I got it, of course. So we're going to add another method, and that is the quadratic formula today. And we'll just have a couple of these to practice, and I think you'll find it not to be all that difficult. So there's the formula again, if you haven't got that down. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now decimals will be wrong. You can use your calculator, especially to find b squared minus 4ac. This is the crucial part. And that's the part we're going to attack first every time. And you have to make sure you get that right. So, and especially when b is negative, things can get a little bit tricky. So let's get to one and see what we can do together here. Now first I want to look and see if my quadratic is in standard form, which this guy is. And a lot of times I like to say what a is. And I'm going to say what b is. And I'm going to say what c is. So I establish my a, my b, and c. So I'm in standard form, set it equal to 0. I establish my a, b, and c. And now, my friends, I'm going to make sure I get my b squared minus 4ac correct. So my b squared minus 4ac, I'm going to use my calculator, and I'm going to put it in just like this. Negative 16 squared minus, I'm going to put another bracket, 4 times my a, which is 2, times my c, which is 27. I'm going to throw that right in my calculator. Now notice I got negative 16 in brackets, and please do that because it won't quite work if you don't. So negative 16 needs to be squared. It needs to be in those brackets because your calculator will make it a positive. That way it's positive number. Your calculator makes it a negative. So first of all, and step 1, okay, is to get this part right here. That's called the discriminant. Underneath this is called the discriminant. And since I'm not really that great this morning with my multiplying those big numbers, anybody have that one for me? What'd you get?
40.
I think it is 40 is correct, okay? So now we're ready to fill out the rest of this. Step 2. Step 1, get that discriminant. Step 2, we're gonna put the rest of the stuff in. So I have negative b, so it's gonna be 16. Okay, that's gonna become positive. I've got b squared minus 4ac as 40. And then I have 2 times my a, that would be 2 times 2, which would be 4. So let's go back. Step 1, we just got b squared minus 4ac. Make sure you're real careful with your b when it's negative. Does everybody get that point? Okay? Now I have the discriminant. I have what's going on here. I'm ready to simplify. Now, decimals will be wrong, so we do need to simplify square root of 40. We've been simplifying radicals now all week, or for the last, all year, really, haven't we? 40, how about 4 times 10, is that good? 4 is the perfect square, okay? So now we're on a roll, we're just simplifying now. So we're gonna have 16 plus or minus 4 times 40 is gonna be 2 square roots of 10. Still over 4. So all I did there was take the square root of 40 and make it 2 square roots of 10. 4 times 10 is 40. We're really close now, okay? So step 1, we got the b squared minus 4ac. Step 2, we plugged it all in. Step 3, we started to simplify the radical. And step 3, part 4, part A, b is to also simplify. This has a commonality on those front end terms there. 16, 2, and 4, of course, 2 can go into all those. So now we're down to 8 plus or minus 2 divided by this. We're not going to write 1 in front of that. We'll just put that as a square root of 10. And then that's going to be over 2. There you have it. Quadratic formula to find your roots. Now those are not little nice and easy 4, 8 roots. They're not whole number roots. They're still real numbers. They're not non-reals. If they had I under the radical, if we had negative under the radical, then we'd introduce some non-reals. But there are your 2 roots using the quadratic formula. Could we also use or do completing the square and get those same answers? We certainly would. Completing the square would get you the same answers. So, how's everybody doing? Step 1, make sure you get b squared minus 4ac. Be careful when b is negative. Make sure you get that number right. Do not make a decimal there. Hello, do not make decimals. Okay, we're looking for numbers here that aren't decimals. Simplify square root of 40. Also, if you end up with some commonality here, you can simplify. Let's try another one. So if we're looking at this guy, my A is 1, my B is 3, my C is negative 7. See if we can get that b squared minus 4ac first. My b is positive, so that's okay. Gotta admit, the snow looked kind of pretty this morning, didn't it? All right, what am I looking at? My b squared minus 4ac. Anybody want to give me a number there that feels confident?
37.
37 is correct. Okay, so we got our b squared, so now we're gonna go minus b. It's 3, it's gonna be minus 3 plus or minus the square root of 37 all over 2 times a, which would be 2. So there was step 1, we found what was underneath b squared minus the discriminant. We found the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac, which was 37. Now we plug in. Now can we simplify? Can the square root of 37, is there anything there? Square root of 37 is dirty, there's nothing going on to it. You can't take anything out. Guess what, my friends? Is there any commonality number in front of those? No, so guess what? This guy he's done. Okay? He is done. Lights out. Over. How are you feeling about quadratic? All right, here you go. X squared minus 8x plus 10. So my A is 1. My B is negative 8, so be careful, it's a negative. And my C is 10. Step 1, find that B squared minus 4AC. You can use your calculator. Make sure you plug it in. So I'm going to put negative 8 in a bracket and square it. Minus 4 times my A, which is 1, times my C, which is 10. Is that right? What am I getting there? 24 is correct. Okay, I'm getting 24. So now I'm going to plug in negative 8, negative B gives me positive 8, plus or minus square root. We found that was 24, B squared minus 4AC. Be careful. If you don't get 24, make sure you practice getting that. Underneath, we have 2 times A. A happens to be 1. Okay, so step 1, we found B squared minus 4AC. Step 2, we plugged in, and now we're trying to simplify. Give you a little second. Square root of 24, there is some action there. We can do some action on square root of 24. It does simplify. That radical is not complete. So we got 24. I look at it as the perfect square of what? 4 times 6. Okay? So we're going to simplify that radical only. We still have 8 out front, plus or minus 2 square roots of 6. Still over 2. So 24, square root of 24 ends up being 2 square roots of 6. We have some commonality with 8, 2, and 2. Looks like 2 goes into all those, doesn't it? So when that happens, we're going to end up with 4 plus or minus the square root of 6. Now that looks a little bit odd because we divided by 2. We don't write the 1 in front of the square root of 6, and we don't need that 1 in the denominator. So does that make sense to everybody? There you have it. Using the quadratic formula to get your roots. Now, would this be true if we did this by completing the square? Would we get the same answer? Yeah, we would. Let's just watch. I'm going to complete the square on this right now. It's the same problem. You can just watch. You don't really need to join me in doing it, writing it down. We should get pretty good at completing the square at this point, most of us. We've been doing it for a while. All right, so I have x squared minus 8x. If I take that over, it becomes negative. Middle term's 8, half would be 4, squaring would be plus 16, right? I get the perfect square trinomial here. Always x, always that sign, always half that. I'm equal to 6 over here. Take the square root of both sides. I'm going to have x minus 4 equals plus or minus square root of 6. Take the 4 over. I'm going to have x equals positive 4 plus or minus square root of 6. And that's the same, isn't it? Now, quite frankly, I felt like that was a little easier completing the square, did you? Than the quadratic. So you never know, okay? It's just like when we did substitution elimination. Sometimes substitution worked easier. Sometimes elimination worked easier. Sometimes completing the square is pretty slick and easy. Sometimes it's not. I like completing the square as long as the middle term is even number. If the middle term's odd, I'm going to go with the quadratic. I also feel like the quadratic's a little easier to mess up because you gotta be careful with b squared minus 4ac. Would you understand what I'm saying there? So take your time when you have that going on. But both methods are awesome and work fine. All right, here you go, last one of this type. And then we got to talk about one other thing. A is 4, B is 3, C is the deuce. Get that b squared minus 4ac first for us. And I just want to remind you to keep an eye on your grade. Keep an eye on something you're missing. In all actuality, it's almost easier to keep up now with all the technology and Canvas. Much easier for everybody to keep up. Would you agree? So there's no excuse. Please keep going. B squared 9. Is it going to give me a negative number on that? What are we getting? Negative what?
23.
Negative 23. All right, so let's go ahead and plug in some information here. We're going to have negative 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 23, you're telling me? All over 2 times a, which is 8. Had some pizza last night, Antonio's. Yeah, it was pretty good. After all that turkey and all that stuff for like 5 days straight. No, it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, yeah. I was like, Mrs. Grubb, I need a pizza tonight, so yeah. Chomp down a big pepperoni pizza from Antonio's. This one, not much to do, but there's one small thing, so make sure you know. Anytime we have a negative in that radical, he's got to come out. I'm going to have I. Nothing I can do with 23. There's no commonality with negative 3 and 8, and that's it right there. So there is that one little slight thing there. You see when we have that negative square root, that guy's coming out. That's negative, or is I. Everybody good? So we can't have a negative radical. That gives us those complex solutions. Last thing for today, check this out for me. And we're going to call it a day here shortly. We're not even going to do this one. You guys should be good. This is called the discriminant. Okay? B squared minus 4ac. It determines what kind of roots we're going to have. Okay? So if you would hang in there just for a second longer and pay attention just for a second. If b squared minus 4ac is a positive number, okay, we're going to have 2 real solutions. So if it's 10, 20, 30, whatever, it's going to cross the x-axis twice. B squared minus 4ac, if it's a positive number, okay, you're going to say 2 distinct. Now, I'm not asking you to find the roots. I'm just asking you the big problems. I'm going to say, hey, how many roots are there? You don't have to find them. You just say, yeah, there's 2. Yeah, there's 1. There's none. There's no radials. Make sense? And now so all you have to do is calculate b squared minus 4ac. You don't have to do the rest of it. So if it's 0, okay, if b squared minus 4ac is 0, there's going to be 1 distinct that bumps the x-axis. And what we just had, if it's a negative number, okay, which we just had, so that'd be that we just had negative square root of 23. Which was I square roots of 23. Anytime we get negative square root, we know what's non-real. We've been working with non-reals now for a little bit, haven't we? Okay, for a week or so now. So when you do get that negative discriminant b squared, guess what? It doesn't cross the x-axis. We're in with a complex. Okay, we're not crossing the x-axis all the time. So when we get that negative square root, there's no real numbers. It's going to be 2 non-reals. We're going to do about 2 of these, and then I'm going to have just a couple of problems for you to finish. You'll be able to submit this before you leave. Again, try not to get overwhelmed. Try to do a little bit every day, okay? Try to use your time in class wisely. Try to stay on top of stuff. If you start to get overwhelmed, back off and just try to do one thing at a time. There's a lot. It's a lot for everybody with everything. All right. How many solutions? So all I'm really asking you to find is b squared minus 4ac. Now, we do have a problem here. What is the first problem? It is not in standard form. So let's get that done. So we'll have x squared minus 4x. Bring that out. It's going to be plus 4 equals 0. So my a is 1. My b is up. Watch b. When you got to watch that b when it is a negative number. In this case, it is. Be careful. Okay, so we're going to use our calculator just to get a number, whether it's positive, 0, or negative. That's all we're looking for. Positive, negative. All right, so b squared, that's negative 4. But remember, that needs to be squared. Minus 4ac. A is 1. C is 4. Negative times negative is positive. Oh, looks like it's 16 minus 16, doesn't it? So what are we getting here? Our discriminant, our b squared, is 0. So how many solutions do we have on this particular quadratic? Just 1. Okay? It's going to bump the x-axis. Does anybody know where it bumps the x-axis at? Press me in. It is at x equaling 2. X equaling 2. This is a quick factor, by the way. It does factor pretty quickly. Okay, the x minus 2, x minus 2. So x equaling 2 is your root and where it would bump. One more of these. Again, put it in standard form first. So they all got to be set equal to 0. So we're looking at x squared minus 4x plus 8 equals 0. So get your b squared minus 4ac and say no solutions, no reals, 2 reals, or 1. 2 non-reals, sorry. That's your only 3 possibilities. 2 reals, 1 real, 2 non-reals. So you got a 33% chance of guessing if you want. But it's not that hard, so you can figure it out pretty quickly. Here's your b is negative, so be careful. So I really don't much matter to me. Is this a negative number, positive number, or 0? That's all that matters. What is it? Negative number, positive number, or 0? It is a negative number, isn't it? Okay, let's check it out and see. We have negative 4 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times 8. Okay, so we're going to get positive 16 minus 32, right? It's going to give us a negative number. So what kind of solutions and what do we have? 2 non-reals. 2 non-reals. Does this parabola cross the x-axis? Hello, does this parabola cross the x-axis? No, it does not. How are we feeling, everybody? On the Tuesday, that kind of feels like a Monday. Is everybody good? Remember, it is Tuesday. Got a jump start on the weekend, on the next week. So, just make sure you remember, this would be 2 real solutions. This would be 1. This would be no solution. So, sometimes it just depends where those intercepts are. Just to refresh your memory there. Okay, you can use your calculator, it can certainly help you. Go to your y equals and you can plug them in sometimes. It can help you figure out the properties of the quadratic, which we have got a lot of them. Remember, you can use either method, but we're going to work on 19 through 35 odd. Thanks for hanging in there today. You guys were spectacular.